All right, so one of the common mistakes that I think people make, especially if you're new and you're trying to make good decisions, but whether it was 1982 when I first came here or last summer, 2022, there's a tendency, and I understand it, but there's a tendency for us to listen to what our neighbor's saying. Now that's 1982 language. In 2022, of course, our neighbor could be right here, whether social media or whatever. And neighbors can give us great advice, but I would say that a mistake that people make is they jump on a rumor. Especially rumors about evacuations. Someone sees that, oh, the Navy is moving, so the big one is coming here, or vice versa. It could be a good or bad rumor as far as the information, but it might not be factual. So I would say the biggest mistake people make is, especially nowadays, when you can go to a million different places for information, make sure you're making your decision with people you trust. Now, hopefully, that's First Coast News, because when we say that we're on your side, we're not trying to alarm you, but we're trying to make sure that you get the facts as quick as you possibly can to make the decisions. And it could be as dramatic as, do we evacuate? Or it could be you're getting new information. That's another mistake that occurs. Sometimes people make their decisions on old information. We're always going to be giving you the newest information, and certainly with the hurricane. Here's another thing to remember. We are definitely getting better with forecasting a hurricane. However, many of us, and for good reasons, are making decisions on when to act on the hurricane much farther in the future. What I mean about that is it used to be, for instance, back in 1982, very often if people were going to evacuate, they wouldn't evacuate until the day before a hurricane hits. Nowadays, for all kinds of reasons, more people, more traffic, better information, better forecast, nowadays sometimes people make those decisions 3, 4, 5 days before the hurricane hits. And although hurricane forecasting is getting better, still on that 3rd or 4th or 5th day, we're as iffy now there as we used to be one day. So therefore, it can be really critical, not only the information you're getting, but where you're getting it from and when you get it. So when you hear us talk about on your side, it's not just a promo, it's really us trying to say, we're trying to help you make the best decisions. We love it when you talk to your neighbors. In fact, we're going to hear from our neighbors during the hurricane special. Our neighbors sometimes, I think, give us the best real-world advice. It's one thing for us to be giving you advice, but your neighbors know your area, your county, whether you're 5 miles from the beach, on the beach, or 35 miles from the beach. And maybe you're new to the area. Maybe you've lived in Northeast Florida or Southeastern Georgia for 40 years, but you've never actually lived in this spot. You've never actually had your child at this daycare. You've never actually had your parent at this assisted living location. You've never maybe worked where your spouse is one place and you're 20 miles away and your child is 30 miles in the other direction. It could be that you experienced a hurricane 40 years ago, but it's totally different now when there's so much information on social media. All of those reasons are why, yes, I like to think that on your side means as a weather team, we're going to be giving you the best forecast possible. But I think it's more than that. I think it's okay. We hear the weather forecast, we trust the forecast, but when will my daycare shut down? When will the bridge shut down? When will my company decide to close? What happens if my company decides not to close, but my daycare? I mean, there's just a lot of things that happen when forecasts are made. So maybe that's a long-winded way of saying let's put it this way. I think you'll make less mistakes if you go to places you trust, people who are really thinking about we're being on your side, whether it's the forecast or then even from all of our reporters and anchors who are saying, okay, here's the forecast. What does that mean for your neighborhood, the school your kids go to, the place that your parents are at?
All right. So I would say when it comes to hurricanes, tropical storms, some of the most common mistakes that people can make are really not paying attention to the updates in the forecast. Okay, so we can be tracking a storm 2 weeks out, but it's going to change. The forecast is going to change, and it can change, you know, based off of just a couple of hours, especially as we get closer and we really start to fine-tune those details. So I think hanging on to an initial forecast, or maybe a forecast that you like or you don't like, whatever it is, just make sure you keep an open mind, right? And know that it's going to change, and that those impacts can, you know, vary depending on where that storm is headed or the strength if it changes. I think that is a big mistake. There's also a lot of other mistakes too, you know, not taking it seriously, not realizing that you're in a flood zone, not realizing that you need to evacuate, not preparing for the pets, or one thing that I know from growing up in Southeast Florida and dealing with lots of hurricanes is not knowing to prepare for a lengthy or unpleasant aftermath, right? Not having enough food. At one point after Wilma, my family and I were frying hot dogs because we didn't have anything else in the house to cook. So it's just, you know, stocking up, not going crazy, not panic buying, but being smart and planning ahead.
Okay, so over 40 years, there's no doubt the decisions people make have been changing, if nothing else, because of technology. But I do think what worked 40 years ago works now, and that is for you and your family, have a to-go bag, baskets, place in the garage where if there's a hurricane warning, if you're being asked to evacuate, everything is ready to go. Or if there's a hurricane warning and you decide you can stay and it's a safe thing to do, you already have everything you need. And you may say, well, what about food that's going to go bad and stuff for the kids? Well, actually remember, most things that you need for a hurricane, whether you're talking about leaving or staying, are really things that you would have that aren't going to go bad if the power goes out or you don't have power. So most of the food we're talking about, and water, and stuff for your kids, information for your parents, bill record keeping, all that kind of stuff, none of that's should go bad wherever you decide to store it or keep it. Some people, and we will give you checklists. There'll be an official on your side checklist for whether you're evacuating or whether you're staying. I like to think of it as, if for those of you that are campers, that think about if you're going to go camping, that is without power. If you're going to go camping, what would you take? And for how many days? Normally that's going to work whether you're going to evacuate, and because when you evacuate, you have a desire to get someplace, but you may get stuck in traffic. In fact, we're going to hear from some of our neighbors during the hurricane special who were stuck in traffic for a long time. They're going to share great lessons about how they would do it differently, what they experienced, maybe how they would make decisions earlier, or maybe go in a whole different direction. But suppose you decide it is safe to stay, but you need to assume if we're under hurricane warning, you could be losing power. Some of that same kind of stuff that you or campers would use would work fantastic in the house for you and your kids and the dog and the cat and whatever, whoever else you might care about.
Okay, so one of my favorite little tips is if you think you could lose power after a storm, and even if it's for a shorter amount of time period, right? So if you're going to lose power, obviously you're concerned about the food, the perishables in your fridge. So one thing that we learned going through hurricanes is you fill a water bottle only halfway, all right? Put it on its side let it freeze, and then put it back vertical in the fridge, and then or the freezer, and then you'll have that little thin layer of ice on the side of the water bottle. Now, if you lose power, that's obviously going to start to melt, right, in the freezer. And so if you get the power back on, maybe you're returning after you evacuated, and you open up that freezer and you see that, oh no, now the ice is like this in the water bottle versus on the side, you know that it had melted and the stuff in the freezer is no good anymore. So super simple, and actually we still have a water bottle sitting in my freezer. We can take it out because we have it, you know, it's been winter and leading into hurricane season, but might as well just keep it there at this point.